My name is Nana May, but everyone calls me Nana May, and this happened to me. The bank message popped up while I was kneading dough. Flour on my hands, apron tied too tight, morning light coming through the kitchen window. 200 transactions pending, venue-related deposits. I froze. Read it again. Then again. 200. Venue. Deposits. One word hit me like a slap. Wedding. Why was I the last to know? I wiped my hands and opened the family WhatsApp group. May family official. The one with cousins I barely talked to and aunties who only messaged during Eid. The messages were exploding. Voice notes. Heart emojis. Laughing reactions. Then I saw it. A photo. A digital wedding invite. White roses. Gold border. And there it was, bold and centered. Venue. May Farmhouse, Main Road. My farmhouse. My land. My name. My address. Used without asking me. My chest tightened. I scrolled. Wow, such a big place. Perfect for 200 guests. Parking is great. Nana May is so generous. Generous. I hadn't said yes. I hadn't even been asked. I pressed play on a voice note. It was my daughter-in-law. Sweet voice. Carefully cheerful. Auntie surprise. We finalized everything. Don't worry, you won't have to do much. I stared at the screen. Won't have to do much? This was my home. My land. The place I planted with my husband before he died. The place I protected when everyone else said sell. I typed slowly. Me. When were you planning to tell me? The typing dots appeared. Disappeared. Then a message. Her. Oh, Nana May, don't be upset. It's family. What's yours is ours, no? Something cracked inside me. I called my son. It rang. Once. Twice. He didn't answer. I sent a voice note. Beta, call me. Please. Nothing. Silence. That silence felt louder than shouting. By noon, the smart doorbell alerted me. Motion detected. I opened the feed. A delivery truck. Men unloading chairs. Tables. Tents. At my gate. I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking now. I stepped outside. Who sent you? I asked one of the men. He checked his phone. Booking is under Mr. Adil May, he said. My son. He didn't even use my name. I stood there as they unloaded. Neighbors slowed their cars. Watched. Whispered. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Public. Visible. Humiliating. My sister-in-law arrived next. Big sunglasses. Big smile. Why are you standing like this, she said. You should be happy. Big wedding. I looked at her. You knew. I asked. She waved her hand. It just happened, she said. Don't make a scene. That's when I realized. I was the scene. That evening, the family video called. Everyone except me. I watched from the group preview. Laughter. Cake tasting. Someone said, venue is confirmed. I waited. No one added me. Later, my son finally came. Didn't look at me at first. They already told everyone, he said quietly. What do you want me to do now? I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I sat down. When did my house stop being mine? I asked softly. He didn't answer. That night I lay awake, listening to the farm sounds. Wind through trees. Dogs barking far away. I remembered my husband's voice. Never give away ground you stand on. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A private message. From an unknown number. You should cooperate. It's better for everyone. No name. No explanation. Just pressure. I opened my old laptop. The one no one touches. The one with scanned documents. Property papers. Digital wills. Names. Signatures. I hadn't planned to use them. But maybe. I stayed quiet to keep the peace. And look where peace had brought me. Outside, the chairs stood stacked. Waiting. 200 guests were coming. Using my address. Without my permission. Without my voice. Without my consent. My name is Nana May, but everyone calls me Nana May. And this happened to me. The morning after the chairs arrived, I woke up with the same heaviness I used to feel years ago, when my husband was sick and everyone expected me to be strong without asking how much strength I had left. The farmhouse was quiet, but the quiet felt temporary, like the pause before a storm. I made tea, sat at the dining table, and stared at the wedding invite still glowing on my phone. 200 guests, my address, my land, and not a single message asking for my consent. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. When did my silence become permission? By 9 a.m., the family WhatsApp group was alive again. Someone shared a seating plan. Someone else asked about extra parking. My name kept appearing in messages like decoration. Nana May's place is perfect. Nana May always wanted a big wedding. Nana May won't mind. I read every message without replying. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I stayed quiet. I had stayed quiet before, and it had always been easier than confrontation. I told myself I was protecting the peace. But peace, I was learning, often protects the wrong people. Around noon, my daughter-in-law sent me another voice note. Her tone was softer this time, almost rehearsed. She said she hoped I wasn't upset and reminded me that family events bring blessings. She said elders should feel proud when their children take charge. I listened twice. She never said sorry. She never asked permission. She spoke as if the decision had already been blessed by time itself. I finally replied, typing carefully so my words wouldn't shake. I asked her who signed the venue agreement. The reply came quickly. Adil handled it. Don't worry. Nana May, everything is sorted. Sorted? That word landed heavily in my chest. Sorted meant done without me. Sorted meant I had been removed from my own decision. In the afternoon, a neighbor stopped by. She smiled politely and congratulated me on the wedding. I thanked her automatically, the way women my age are trained to do. After she left, I sat down and felt the humiliation settle in. The entire village knew before I did. People were already assuming my approval. My authority, the quiet respect I had built over decades, was being rewritten without my involvement. That evening, my son came again. This time he brought printed papers, vendor lists, tent layouts, catering menus. He placed them on the table like evidence. He spoke quickly, as if speed would soften the truth. He said everything was already paid for. He said canceling would cause embarrassment. He said people would talk. When I asked him why he didn't ask me first, he rubbed his forehead and said, I didn't think you'd say no. That sentence hurt more than anger would have. It meant he didn't see me as someone whose opinion mattered. It meant my role had changed without my consent, from decision maker to obstacle. I asked him quietly whose money was used for the advance payments. He hesitated, just for a second. Then he said family funds. That answer was too vague. I asked again. He avoided my eyes and said my joint account had been temporarily used, but he planned to settle it later. That was the moment fear joined humiliation. My financial security, something I had guarded carefully since becoming a widow, had been touched without my approval. After he left, I checked my bank app again. Smaller withdrawals now. Spread out. Easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. I realized then that the wedding wasn't just about celebration. It was about control. About testing how much of me could be used without resistance. That night, I opened my husband's old files. The ones no one ever asks about. Property documents. Digital copies of the will. Notes he had written in his careful handwriting. One sentence stood out, something I had forgotten until that moment. If they stop asking, it means they've stopped respecting. I closed the file and felt tears finally come. Quiet ones. The kind that don't ask for comfort. The next day, a lawyer's message appeared on my phone. Not my lawyer. Someone else's. He politely informed me that the farmhouse was being listed as the wedding venue and asked for my cooperation to avoid unnecessary complications. That phrase made my stomach tighten. Complications usually mean pressure. Pressure often means force, disguised as concern. I replied that all communication should go through my legal representative. I didn't have one yet, but I knew I would. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not fear, but clarity. I had spent years being careful so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Now, they were counting on that habit. That evening, the smart doorbell recorded another visit. More deliveries. More strangers walking my land like it already belonged to them. I watched the footage twice, noticing how confidently they moved, how familiar the space already felt to people who didn't own it. That's when I understood something painful but important. exclusion doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives dressed as celebration. Before sleeping, I received another message from the unknown number. This one was shorter, don't involve outsiders. It won't end well. I stared at it for a long time. My heart didn't race anymore. It slowed. Threats only work when you still believe you're alone. I wasn't alone. I had documents. I had memory. I had my name on every paper that mattered. And I was done confusing silence with dignity. My name is Nana May, but everyone calls me Nana May, and this happened to me. The guest list arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Not by hand, not with respect, but as a forwarded PDF in the family WhatsApp group. No greeting, no explanation, just a file dropped into the conversation like an order already approved. I opened it slowly, already sensing the weight of what I was about to see. 200 names filled the screen, page after page. Families I recognized, names I barely knew, business associates of my son, friends of my daughter-in-law, and distant relatives who had never once checked on me after my husband's death. I scrolled to the top again, searching for something simple. My name. It wasn't there. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. My eyes scanned again, slower this time. Still nothing. I was the owner of the land, the woman whose address was printed boldly on every invitation. Yet I wasn't listed as a host, not even as a family elder. I felt a quiet sadness settle into my chest, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly, but stays. When did I stop mattering enough to be named? A cousin replied in the group, praising the arrangements and thanking my daughter-in-law for hosting such a beautiful event. Hosting. The word stung. Another message followed, saying, Nana May is lucky to have children who take responsibility. Lucky. I had never felt less fortunate in my life. I typed a message, deleted it, typed again, then erased everything. I stayed quiet to keep the peace. I told myself it was just a list, just paper. But humiliation doesn't need a stage. Sometimes it only needs witnesses. And this humiliation was happening in front of an entire family, quietly rewriting my role while I watched. Later that evening, my sister called. Her voice was careful, hesitant. She asked if everything was all right. I asked her what she meant. She sighed and said people were talking, wondering why I looked absent from my own son's wedding planning. That word again. Absent. As if I had chosen to disappear. I told her I was fine. The lie came easily. Lies often do when you've practiced them for years in the name of harmony. That night, I overheard my son on a call. He didn't know I was near the hallway. His voice was low, tense. He said something about managing Nana May and keeping things smooth. I stood there longer than I should have, listening to my own name used like a problem to be solved. That was the moment anger finally surfaced, not loud or explosive, but sharp and focused. The next day, a live stream appeared on Facebook. A cousin had gone live from my farmhouse, showing decorations being tested, flowers being arranged, and tables placed under the old neem tree my husband had planted. Comments poured in. Compliments. Excitement. Someone wrote, "So generous of Nana May to give her place." I watched silently as strangers praised a generosity I had never offered. I wanted to comment, to correct them, to say this was done without me. But I didn't. Not yet. Public humiliation has layers, and I was still understanding how deep this one went. In the afternoon, a hospital number called. My heart jumped, fear arriving before reason. When I answered, the woman on the line politely asked me to confirm my availability for a stress evaluation requested by a family member. My hand tightened around the phone. Evaluation. Requested. Family member. I asked who had made the request. She said she couldn't disclose details but assured me it was for my well-being. I hung up without replying. That call changed everything. This was no longer about a wedding. This was about control. About preparing a story where my resistance could be labeled as instability. I sat down and realized something painful. They weren't just excluding me. They were preparing to discredit me. That evening, I finally spoke. I sent a message to the family group. Just one sentence. Polite, calm, clear. I asked who had authorized the use of my property and finances without my written consent. The group went silent. No reactions. No replies. The typing dots never appeared. Silence, I learned, can be louder than denial. An hour later, my daughter-in-law called. Her voice was tight now, sweetness gone. She said I was embarrassing them. She said elders should support, not question. She said people would think I was greedy. Greedy. After everything I had sacrificed. That word felt like a final insult. I told her quietly that this was my home and my name. She paused, then said something I will never forget. She said, "Things change, Nana May. You can't hold on forever." That was when I realized they weren't asking me to share. They were asking me to step aside. That night, I opened my email and found a draft document attached. A revised family arrangement. It listed new responsibilities, new decision makers, and my role reduced to ceremonial presence. No signatures yet. Just a suggestion. A future they were preparing without my approval. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. I didn't raise my son to erase me. I didn't spend my life building a home to be treated like a guest. And I didn't survive loss just to be quietly replaced. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of confrontation. I was afraid of what would happen if I stayed silent one more time. My name is Nana May, but everyone calls me Nana May, and this happened to me. The hospital envelope arrived without warning. No phone call first. No courtesy. Just an official logo. My full name printed neatly, and a tone that already assumed authority. I held it in my hands for a long time before opening it, as if weight alone could tell me what was inside. When I finally read the letter, my chest tightened. It was a formal request for a psychological wellness assessment, submitted by a concerned family member. The language was polite, almost caring, but the meaning underneath was sharp and unmistakable. They were questioning my sanity. I sat at the dining table where I had once helped my son with homework, where my husband and I had planned our future, and I read that letter again and again. It said the assessment was recommended due to sudden emotional distress, resistance to family decisions, and confusion regarding property arrangements. Confusion. That word again. As if disagreement automatically meant instability. I called the hospital number printed at the bottom. My voice was calm when I asked who had made the request. The woman on the line repeated that it was confidential. When I asked if the request could affect my legal or financial autonomy, there was a pause. Then she said, "In some cases, yes." That was all I needed to hear. That afternoon, my son came over unannounced. He didn't sit down. He stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. I asked him directly if he knew about the hospital letter. He hesitated for just a moment too long. Then he nodded. He said it was only a precaution, that everyone was worried about me. That stress can make people act irrationally. Hearing those words from my own child felt heavier than hearing them from strangers. I told him I was not confused. I told him I was not unstable. I told him I simply wanted to be asked before my home, my money, and my name were used. He sighed and said, "Mom, you're making this bigger than it needs to be." That sentence carried years of dismissal inside it. Every time I had swallowed my feelings to keep peace, every time I had stepped back so others could step forward, echoed in that moment. After he left, I locked the door and cried for the first time since this began. Not loudly, quietly. The kind of crying that comes when you realize the people who should protect you are willing to label you difficult if you don't cooperate. The next blow came through email. A legal notice, politely worded, requesting clarification of property ownership and usage rights of the farmhouse. It referenced upcoming events, public liability, and family consensus. Consensus. I laughed then, a dry sound that surprised even me. Consensus usually means everyone agreed, except the one who actually owns the thing. I forwarded the email to a lawyer friend I had known for years but never needed before. Within an hour, he called me. His voice was serious. He told me not to sign anything, not to attend any assessment without representation, and most importantly, not to assume this was accidental. He said patterns like this usually mean someone is preparing a case, not a celebration. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside felt intrusive. I replayed conversations in my head, noticing details I had ignored before. The way decisions were already made when I was informed. The way my questions were treated like emotional outbursts. The way concern quickly turned into pressure. I realized then that control doesn't always arrive with cruelty. Sometimes it arrives with smiles and paperwork. The following morning, my daughter-in-law visited. She brought sweets. She hugged me longer than usual. Her kindness felt rehearsed. She told me the family was worried about my stress and that agreeing to the assessment would reassure everyone. When I asked her who suggested it, she avoided the question. She said elders sometimes need guidance and there was no shame in support. Support that begins without consent is not support. It's supervision. I told her calmly that I would not attend any evaluation without legal advice. Her face changed, not dramatically, but enough. She reminded me that resistance could be misinterpreted. That word again. Misinterpreted. I nodded and said nothing. Silence, I was learning, could also be preparation. After she left, I went through my documents carefully. Every deed, every signature, every digital backup, everything was in my name, just as my husband had intended. I felt a quiet strength return. They could question my emotions, but they could not rewrite facts. In the afternoon, the family WhatsApp group became active again. Messages about catering delays, seating issues, and weather concerns filled the screen. No one mentioned the assessment letter. No one mentioned my questions. It was as if my resistance had been edited out. That invisibility hurt more than open confrontation. That evening, I received a call from a private number. A man introduced himself as a legal consultant advising the family. He spoke gently, suggesting compromise. He said cooperation would prevent unnecessary escalation. When I asked what escalation meant, he paused and said, formal proceedings. That was the moment fear turned into resolve. I ended the call and sat quietly. I thought about all the times I had stayed quiet to keep the peace, about how that silence had slowly trained people to move without me. I realized then that peace built on erasure is not peace at all. Before going to bed, I wrote down everything. Dates, messages, calls, names. I backed them up in 3 places. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for the truth. And for the first time since this began, I felt something else alongside fear. Control. My name is Nana May, but everyone calls me Nana May, and this happened to me. I didn't confront anyone the next day. I didn't call family meetings or send angry messages. Instead, I did something they didn't expect. I became very quiet. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of someone listening closely. When people believe you are emotional, they underestimate your memory. When they believe you are weak, they forget how much you've seen. I opened the old metal cabinet in my bedroom, the one no one touches anymore. Inside were folders wrapped in cloth, some yellowed with time, some newer. These were not just property papers. These were years of records, receipts, letters, agreements, small notes my husband used to write in the margins. He was careful like that. He believed in leaving trails that could not be erased by opinion. I spent hours sorting everything. I found the original farmhouse deed, registered solely in my name, along with the notarized inheritance document my husband had completed years before his death. There was no ambiguity, no shared ownership, no verbal promises written into law. I realized then how confident they must have been to move without checking. Confidence often grows where assumptions live. Later that afternoon, I visited the bank branch I had avoided for months. The manager recognized me immediately. He offered tea and spoke kindly, but his tone changed when I asked about recent activity. I requested a printed statement, not summaries, but full records. He hesitated for a moment, then complied. As I scanned the pages, my heart slowed. Several payments had been authorized using a family mandate I had signed years ago for emergencies. Catering, lighting, tent rentals, all charged before I had been told anything. I asked the manager if that mandate allowed event booking without verbal confirmation. He shook his head. It was for medical or urgent household use only. He suggested I revoke it immediately. I did. My signature felt heavier than usual, but also clearer. Control, once reclaimed, does not feel dramatic. It feels steady. That evening, I received another message from the unknown number. It said the family was growing concerned about my lack of response. It advised me to think about unity and reputation. Reputation. I stared at the word. Reputation is often used to silence the person who tells the truth first. I did not reply. Instead, I called my lawyer friend again. This time, I didn't sound unsure. I told him everything. The booking, the bank activity, the assessment request, the pressure. He listened quietly, then said something that stayed with me. He said this was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a strategy. He advised me to document everything and prepare a formal notice. Not to send it yet, just to prepare. He said timing mattered. People who rush reveal fear. People who wait reveal power. The next morning, I walked the farm. The land was quiet, as if it was holding its breath with me. I touched the trees my husband had planted. I remembered why this place mattered. It wasn't about money. It was about legacy. About not letting years of work be rewritten as convenience for someone else. By noon, the wedding decorators arrived again. This time, I did not argue. I simply told them politely that all future access required written confirmation from me. They looked confused. One of them called someone immediately. Within minutes, my phone rang. My son. His voice was tense. He asked why I was creating complications. I told him calmly that I was simply following the law. He went silent. That silence told me more than shouting ever could. That night, I backed up every file digitally. I gave copies to my lawyer. I wrote down one final list, who knew what and when. This was no longer about a wedding. This was about consent, control, and how easily people forget boundaries when they think you won't push back. Before sleeping, I opened the hospital letter again. I read it without fear this time. If they wanted to question my sanity, I would meet them prepared. Mentally, legally, factually, because confusion fades when facts stand firm. My name is Shireen, but everyone calls me Nana May, and this happened to me. The first sign that my silence was working came from the family group chat. A message appeared early in the morning. Too polite, too carefully worded. It said everyone was worried about my health and wanted to check in. No questions about the farm. No mention of the wedding arrangements. Just concern. I read it twice and didn't respond. Silence, when unexpected, forces people to talk to themselves. By afternoon, the smart doorbell alerted me to visitors I hadn't invited. My sister-in-law stood at the gate with my son's wife beside her. They were smiling in that careful way people do when they've rehearsed what they're about to say. I watched them on my phone for a full minute before opening the door. When I did, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask why they were there. I simply stepped aside and let them in. They sat at my dining table and talked about small things. Weather, traffic, a cousin's illness. Then, gently, the conversation turned. They said the wedding stress had become overwhelming. They said misunderstandings were hurting everyone. They said families survive on forgiveness. I nodded slowly. I didn't interrupt. When they finally paused, waiting for me to speak, I asked a single question. I asked who had authorized payments from my bank account. The room shifted. My daughter-in-law looked at my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law cleared her throat and said everything had been done in good faith. She said no one meant to upset me. I asked again, calmly, who had signed off on it. This time, no one answered immediately. Silence sat between us like something heavy. I told them I had revoked the mandate. I said it without emotion, as if I were discussing groceries. My daughter-in-law's face tightened for just a second before she masked it. She asked what I meant. I explained that no further access to my accounts would be possible without my direct consent. I said this was not punishment. It was clarity. They left soon after. No arguments. No accusations. Just urgency in their steps. That evening, I received 3 missed calls. I didn't return them. The next day, my lawyer sent me a draft notice. It was firm but respectful. It stated ownership, consent requirements, and boundaries. It mentioned misuse of authorization without accusations. It was the kind of document that doesn't shout, but cannot be ignored. I didn't send it yet. I wanted them to feel the uncertainty a little longer. 2 days later, the wedding planner called. Her voice was strained. She said several payments had bounced. Vendors were asking questions. I told her she would need to coordinate directly with the people who booked the services. She hesitated, then asked if the venue was still available. I said the venue was my home, and access required my approval. That evening, my son finally came alone. No family members, no backup. He stood in the doorway longer than necessary. When he sat down, he looked older somehow. Tired. He said he didn't want conflict. He said things had gone too far. I listened. Then I asked him why I had found out about his wedding from strangers. He didn't answer immediately. He said they thought I would say no. That was the truth. Small, simple, heavy. I told him I might have said no, or I might have said yes with conditions, but I would have deserved the respect of being asked. He nodded. He didn't argue. That hurt more than any fight would have. That night, another message arrived. This one from a lawyer I didn't recognize. It mentioned property coordination and requested a meeting. I read it slowly. Then I smiled just a little. They were no longer pretending this was about family feelings. It was about control. And for the first time, they were realizing they didn't have it. My name is Nana May, but everyone calls me Nana May, and this happened to me. I agreed to meet their lawyer the next morning. Not at my home. Not at my lawyer's office either. Neutral ground matters when people are trying to control a story. We met in a small conference room above a bank branch, quiet enough that every paper shuffle sounded loud. The lawyer was younger than I expected. Polite. Measured. He began by explaining he represented my son and his wife in matters related to event coordination and property usage. He kept using soft words: coordination, usage, temporary arrangements, words meant to sound harmless. Then he slid a folder across the table. Inside were photocopies of documents I recognized instantly, or thought I did: a consent form, a temporary use agreement, a signature at the bottom that looked like mine, but wasn't. It was close. Close enough to fool someone who wanted to believe it. I didn't react right away. I asked where this document had been filed. He said it had been attached to the wedding planning paperwork to avoid delays. Avoid delays. I asked who had provided it. He said he couldn't disclose that without consent. I closed the folder and said one sentence. I said the signature was not mine. The air changed. He looked at the page again, then at me. He asked if I was sure. I told him I had signed my name the same way for 40 years. I knew the weight of my own hand. That signature was an imitation, a careful one, but still an imitation. I told him I would need a forensic review. His posture shifted. He said that might complicate things. I said forgery already had. When I left, my lawyer was waiting in the car. I handed him the copies without speaking. He looked once, then twice. He said nothing for a long time. Then he said this was serious. Not a family disagreement. Not emotional manipulation. A legal boundary had been crossed. That afternoon, my phone rang constantly. I didn't answer. Messages piled up. Some apologetic. Some urgent. One warned me not to escalate. That word again. Escalate. As if truth were an attack. By evening, my daughter-in-law showed up alone. No smiles this time. No careful politeness. She said things had gone out of hand. She said they were trying to protect everyone. I asked her one question. I asked who signed my name. She cried. Not loudly. Quietly. She said it was just paperwork. She said no one thought I'd notice. That sentence stayed with me. Not notice. I told her something I had never said out loud before. I told her silence does not mean blindness. It means patience. I asked her to leave. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from fear. From clarity. I realized the wedding had never been the real issue. It was a test of how far they could go without my permission, of how much of my authority could be borrowed, bent, or erased. Before midnight, my lawyer called. He said if we moved forward, things would become public. Family would choose sides. I told him I understood. I told him I was ready. Because once someone signs your name for you, they've already decided you don't matter. And I would not let that stand. My name is Nana May, but everyone calls me Nana May, and this happened to me. The morning after the lawyer call, I woke up to silence that felt staged. No messages, no apologies, no warnings. That kind of quiet doesn't happen naturally. It's coordinated. I lay there listening to the house breathe, the old wooden beams, the ticking clock, the farm waking up outside. And I knew something was moving without me. I opened my phone. The family group chat was active again. Messages stacked on top of each other. Time stamped from just before sunrise. My sisters, my cousins, even people who hadn't checked on me in years. They were asking careful questions, the kind that pretend to be neutral but already lean one way. Is it true you're stopping the wedding? Why involve lawyers? Isn't this a family matter? You raised him better than this, didn't you? That last one hurt more than it should have, because it wasn't a question. It was a reminder, a way of placing responsibility back on me, as if I were the one who had signed papers behind someone's back. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again, deleted that too. Then I sent one sentence. I did not stop anything. I was never asked. The chat paused. Then the replies came faster. Some defended me, quietly, private messages instead of public ones. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. This doesn't feel right. Others were sharper. They said I was being difficult, emotional, old-fashioned. They said times had changed, that weddings weren't what they used to be. I stared at the word old-fashioned for a long time. Around noon, my son finally called. Not a text, not a voice note, a call. His voice sounded tired, rehearsed. He said the situation had become stressful. He said people were talking. He said maybe I could help calm things down. I asked him if he knew about the signature. He didn't answer right away. Then he said he didn't want to know details. That sentence told me everything. He had chosen comfort over truth, silence over responsibility. I asked him one thing. I asked him if he would have been okay if someone had signed his name without asking. He said it wasn't the same. I let that sit between us. That afternoon, the smart doorbell footage from the farm started circulating. Someone had clipped a short video. My daughter-in-law arriving weeks earlier, walking around with a planner, pointing at the fields, explaining guest flow. I had been inside, unaware. The clip ended before I stepped out. The caption read, "She approved everything." I watched it 3 times. Approved. A word can be a weapon when it's chosen carefully. By evening, the wedding planner called. Her voice shook. She said she'd been told I was fully on board. She said she'd been sent documents. I asked her who sent them. She hesitated. Then she gave a name. Not my son. Not his wife. My sister-in-law. The same woman who had said, "I'll handle Nana May." She trusts me. I sat down when I heard that. The betrayal layered itself quietly. Not loud. Not dramatic. Practical. Efficient. Family knows exactly how to hurt without leaving marks. I called my sister-in-law. She didn't deny it. She said she was trying to help. She said I was emotional about change. She said the wedding would bring prestige to the farm. Exposure. As if land were a product and not a legacy. I told her she had no right. She replied, someone had to decide. That sentence broke something open in me. Decide. As if my life, my property, my name had been waiting for someone else to take charge. That night, my lawyer sent me something else. A notification from the county office. A request for confirmation regarding temporary liability coverage for the event. The request had been auto-approved using my email. An email I hadn't opened in days. They weren't just borrowing space anymore. They were building a record. One that made it look like I was involved every step of the way. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. He replied with one line, "This is bigger than we thought." By midnight, the family group chat exploded again. Someone leaked that legal action might happen. Accusations flew. People took sides publicly now. Defenders became quieter. Critics louder. I became the problem. I read one message over and over. She's ruining her own son's happiness. I wondered when protecting yourself became a crime. Just before I put my phone down, a private message came in. From the wedding venue coordinator. She said she'd been instructed to move the ceremony location. Not cancel it. Move it. Somewhere else. Quietly. Without telling guests yet. I asked why. She said because the farm situation is unstable. Unstable. They weren't waiting for my answer anymore. They were replacing me. I closed my eyes and felt the quiet sadness finally arrive. The kind that doesn't cry. The kind that just accepts what it sees. But sadness didn't stay long, because the next message, sent accidentally to me instead of someone else, changed everything. It was a screenshot, a message thread, discussing how to delay me legally until after the wedding. My name is Nana May, but everyone calls me Nana May, and this happened to me. The day before the wedding arrived without permission, just like everything else had. I woke before dawn, not because I needed to, but because my body no longer trusted peace. The farm outside my window looked the same as it always had. Mist hanging low, birds restless, soil dark with memory. But I knew it had already been decided that this place no longer belonged to my story. I didn't go anywhere that morning. I stayed home. I made tea I didn't drink. I folded laundry that didn't need folding. I kept my hands busy so my mind wouldn't run ahead of what I was prepared to face. By noon, the phone started again. A cousin sent me a voice note. She said the ceremony had been moved. She said it was simpler this way. Another relative asked if I was feeling better. Better. As if dignity were a fever that would pass if ignored long enough. I asked no one questions. I had learned something important over the last few days. When people think you are quiet because you are weak, they stop hiding. At exactly 2:17 p.m., a WhatsApp notification appeared on my screen from a group I was never supposed to be in. It was labeled Wedding Media Team, Live. Someone had added the wrong contact. Me. I didn't open it immediately. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering, my heart strangely calm. This was the moment that silence often becomes something else. Not noise. Truth. I opened the chat. They were testing the live stream. Camera angles. Audio levels. Someone typed, "Make sure Nana May doesn't get mentioned." Another replied, "She won't be watching." A third said, "Even if she is, it's already done." Already done. I felt anger rise, not sharp, but steady. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that remembers. At 3:04 p.m., the live stream began. I didn't mean to watch. I told myself I wouldn't. But curiosity mixed with grief is a powerful thing. I clicked the link. The screen filled with flowers, white chairs, a place pretending to be intimate while broadcasting itself to the world. People I knew smiled into the camera. People who had eaten at my table. People who had said nothing when my name disappeared. Then my daughter-in-law appeared on screen. She was radiant, calm, confident. She thanked everyone for coming. She thanked those who had helped make this day possible. She thanked family. She did not thank me. I told myself that didn't matter. Then she said it. She said, "We're so grateful to have had the support of our families and the generosity of those who made space for this celebration." Made space. I leaned back in my chair. That phrase had been practiced, polished, designed to sound vague enough to erase me without saying my name. The officiant spoke next. He spoke about legacy, about land passed down, about how love grows where roots are strong. I wondered if he knew he was standing inside a lie. Then something unexpected happened. The camera angle shifted. Not smoothly, not intentionally. Someone had gone live from a second device. A phone, shaking, unfiltered. It showed the behind-the-scenes area. Tables, staff, voices overlapping. And then, clear as day, my sister-in-law's voice. She doesn't even know we used her email. By the time she figures it out, it'll be over. The live stream chat froze. Comments started pouring in. What did she say? Used whose email? Is she talking about Nana May? The person holding the phone panicked. The camera dropped for a second, picked back up. Too late. Another voice followed. My son's voice. Just keep her busy. The lawyer said delays work in our favor. I felt something in my chest give way. Not break. Release. The truth had slipped out, not because I pushed, but because they got careless. The live stream cut abruptly. But the internet does not forget. Within minutes, my phone exploded. Messages from people who had watched. People who hadn't. People who suddenly remembered my name. Some apologized. Some demanded explanations. Some asked if I was okay. I didn't answer any of them, because one message mattered more than all the rest. It came from my lawyer. "Did you authorize that stream?" I said no. He replied, "Good, because now we have witnesses." By evening, clips were circulating everywhere. The words replayed, slowed, analyzed. People heard what they had tried not to hear before. That I had been excluded deliberately, strategically, with planning. The family group chat shut down completely. No one spoke. Silence again. But this time it wasn't control. It was fear. At 9:46 p.m., my son came to the house. Alone. He didn't ring the bell. He stood outside until I opened the door. He looked smaller somehow, like someone who had just realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid after all. He said he hadn't meant for it to go this far. I told him it had gone far the moment my name was signed without my hand. He asked what I was going to do. I told him the truth. I told him I was going to stop explaining myself. He nodded, slowly, like someone hearing a verdict they already knew was coming. As he turned to leave, he asked one last thing. He asked if there was any way to fix this. I didn't answer right away, because fixing something and facing consequences are not the same thing. And I knew what was coming next. The lawyer had already scheduled the filing. My name is Nana May, but everyone calls me Nana May, and this happened to me. The morning of the final court filing, I woke before dawn, the sky still gray with lingering night, and for the first time in days, I felt calm. Not victorious, not relieved, just steady. The farm was quiet, too quiet, and I knew everyone was waiting somewhere, holding their breath, expecting me to stumble, to apologize, to shrink. I brewed tea and sat on the porch, looking at the fields, thinking about all the years I had quietly carried everyone else's burdens while keeping my own worries locked away. My lawyer called, giving me a brief update, and I realized that for the first time, I was fully in control of the narrative. The papers had been filed correctly, my signature intact, my property and my authority legally recognized. By mid-morning, my son arrived. He didn't rush in with excuses. He didn't speak immediately. He just stood at the doorway, hesitant, watching me. I said nothing at first, letting the silence speak the way it always does. Finally, he said he wished things hadn't escalated. I told him that they had, the moment he let decisions about me, my property, my life, be made without me. His head lowered, and for a second I thought I saw regret, but the look was fleeting. I didn't need him to feel guilty. I needed him to understand. And maybe in that quiet he did. Later that day, the wedding planner called, her voice trembling. She apologized, not for the ceremony, not for the invitations, not even for the live stream mishap, but for all the confusion and pain she knew I had endured. I thanked her calmly, letting her know I wasn't angry. That was important. Anger would have made this moment loud. Patience made it sharp. I asked her to make sure any future events would include my approval, and she promised. I knew she would keep that promise, because after the chaos of the last week, no one could risk ignoring Nana May again. Then, the bigger secret revealed itself. My lawyer handed me an envelope, thick with documents I hadn't expected. It turned out that during the rush to organize the wedding without my knowledge, a series of property transfers had been quietly arranged, allegedly for temporary event insurance. All of them had my name listed, all of them automatically approved under my email, but none of them had legal standing without my confirmation. In other words, every attempt to control me, to erase me from my own property, had already failed. I sat there letting that truth sink in, feeling a satisfaction that was quiet and dignified, not gloating, but firm. When the family group chat opened again that evening, the messages were different. Nervous, cautious. Some apologized, some tried to explain, but I stayed quiet. I had learned that words now carried less weight than presence, authority, and proof. I read the messages, noting who had tried to manipulate and who had hesitated. My son reached out privately, asking if we could discuss boundaries. I said yes, calmly, letting him understand that I was no longer invisible, no longer optional. By nightfall, I sat in the living room, alone, sipping tea. Relief mixed with grief. Relief because my authority had been restored. Grief because the people I loved had shown their willingness to bypass me, to gamble with my trust. I realized that even as I regained control, a scar would remain, a quiet reminder that family can be fragile and loyalty fragile too. I let myself feel that sadness fully because it was mine and it belonged to me. Before I went to bed, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from my lawyer. Everything is settled for now, but be careful with who you trust. I smiled faintly, knowing that trust is earned, not assumed, and that sometimes the greatest power is knowing when to stay silent and when to speak. I placed the phone down, closed my eyes, and for the first time in weeks, allowed myself to rest, carrying dignity in my chest, a quiet victory that no one could take away. That night, I dreamed of the farm, my farm, alive with family laughter, not because they had included me before, but because I had finally made it clear that my presence, my voice, my approval mattered. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. There would be more challenges, more tests. But Nana May would face them all, quietly, firmly, with patience and strength. And then I remembered the last line my lawyer had said aloud before leaving that day. This isn't just about property or a wedding. It's about respect. And respect, finally, is yours.